Welcome to the Hope After Child Loss podcast, where we endeavor to offer stories of hope to grieving parents and siblings so that they might rediscover life filled with meaning, purpose, and hope. We invite you to come and join us. Hey guys, welcome to our podcast today. I'm your host, Greg Buffkin, and my guest today is Amy Sylvestre. Amy was originally scheduled to be our guest back in February, I believe it was, but due to some interesting technical challenges, here we are again today. And hopefully today this will go much differently than it did a few months ago. Welcome, Amy. It's good to have you.
Oh, Greg, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat with you and talk about our kids.
Yeah, so am I. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Amy, why don't you take the next couple of minutes and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. As Greg said, I'm Amy Sylvestre, and I currently work for the ministry Nothing is Wasted Ministries that was founded by Davy Blackburn, and I'm their community director, and I wear a couple different hats for them in terms of helping people get connected and find groups that relate to their pain story. Our whole goal as a ministry is to help people go from pain to purpose, whether you've been through trauma or tragedy or any kind of major life transition. Each of us on our team have experienced those things. And so we want to help people not stay in that pit of despair or quiet desperation. We want them to hear from us that, yes, we've been there, we know, and help people move through it. So that's where I am in terms of ministry and work. And then I'm also married to my handsome pilot husband. His name is Corey. And we have 4 children. Our youngest is 2 and our oldest is 9. And today we'll talk a little bit more about our sweet boy Hudson, who's our second born boy. And our youngest 2, our family grew through the beautiful, beautiful gift of adoption. So that's a big piece of my heart as well. And just a little of my background. I've worked for colleges. I've worked for different churches. Part of our life, we've lived in Chicago, outside of Chicago. And then before I got married, I lived in New York City and worked at Redeemer Pres, the church that was founded by Tim Keller. So went to college in North Carolina. So my whole family grew up on a big farm in North Carolina with my brothers and cousins. And so grew up in a great godly home with wonderful parents. So that's a little of who I am.
Yeah, and you're back in North Carolina.
We are. Yeah, we moved back and we're building a house and hoping to put some roots down here back in my home state after being gone for a long time.
Oh, that's great. Sounds like you don't have a whole lot of spare time these days.
Yeah, it's been full. It's been very full between having little kids and ministry and life. It's been good, full, but very full.
Yeah. Well, I am so glad that you made time in that busy schedule to come and join us today. So I think what we'll do is just let you spend the next few minutes sharing the story, as you alluded to a minute ago, about your sweet boy, Hudson, and the journey that you guys have been on for quite a while now.
Yeah, I love to talk about Hudson. He is a special, special boy. His older brother, we had him and everything was fine. And then we started talking about having a second baby. And so when we got pregnant with Hudson, all was normal. Like we didn't think anything was wrong. There was no reason to think anything was different from my first pregnancy. And I was driving. So I was on my way to work, but I was like, okay, I'm going to fit in one of those pregnancy appointments. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do the earliest appointment and then just head on with my day. And so I got the earliest appointment they would let me have. And then I was going to drive to the college where I was working. And so we were in this anatomy scan. That's the longest kind of ultrasound that they do. And I was just chatting up this lady she was so personable. And then she got real quiet and she kind of left me there for a second, like with the Doppler and everything. Like I was just kind of laying there and she got the doctor and they came in and they basically said that they couldn't find 2 chambers of Hudson's heart. We hadn't named him yet, so we weren't calling him Hudson yet, but they couldn't find 2 chambers of his heart. And I knew from biology in college that there were 4 chambers of a heart, but I didn't know enough to know, but what does that mean? There was no diagnosis in that conversation. We were in a smaller hospital. And so they basically quickly got me an appointment with maternal fetal medicine in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time we were there. And so, so I think within 24 to 48 hours, we were there. And I had already done all my Googling to find out what this was called. And it's called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And it's basically where a portion of the baby's heart in utero does not form properly. And so it means like blood flow won't flow to the lungs and then out and all the things it's supposed to do when you have a 4-chambered heart. And so I just thought like, okay, well, am I going to miscarry at 20 weeks? Like I didn't know. Like I didn't know what being a heart mom was. I was kind of thrown into this world with the diagnosis at that meeting in Charlotte. And from there, our life turned into an absolute whirlwind, emotionally, life, everything. The doctors in Charlotte, the cardiologist, maternal fetal medicine, everyone was great. And they said, we have done surgeries for babies with this condition here, but we kept hearing you should go to Philadelphia. Like that kind of kept coming up. Yeah. But I'm like, we have a home, we have a 14-month-old, we have jobs, like we can't just like go to Philadelphia for
right.
So it felt impossible. But then I saw a new doctor at one of my appointments. They were seeing me a lot at this point, and he basically was like, "You need to go to Philly," because Philadelphia has the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is world renowned. It's basically them in Boston. There's a few other hospitals that are known for heart babies, but they are well known. And even I'm pretty sure, if my history is correct, that the surgeries that are required for a baby with this condition was founded out from my doctor at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, if I'm remembering all those details from a few years ago. So this doctor that I had met called me that night after my appointment. I remember it was like 9:45 at night. And he was like, I have an appointment for you. This was, I think, a Wednesday. You remember all these details stick in your brain. And he's like, I have an appointment for you Friday in Philadelphia and you need to be there. And I was like, I don't know how to make that happen with our life. And he's like, this is your best chance to save your son. And so I was like, okay, move it to Monday and we'll figure it out. Like, it gave me the weekend to like figure out my life. And so we ended up, my husband's a pilot, and so his schedule was crazy. So I actually ended up going with my very dear best friend, and she's also my sister-in-law, Crystal. She kind of dropped her life and went with me. And we were from sun up to sundown. We were there and doing 3-hour ultrasounds and MRIs and meetings with doctors and probes. And I mean, I just felt like they were trying to get all the information they could about our sweet boy. And I can't remember. At some point they did like blood draws and all these things for genetic testing. I mean, it was just very involved. And so they came back and gave us the same diagnosis of hypoplastic left heart syndrome. But they did say, go home and get your stuff and move here. Because he had some other complications. He was retaining some fluid that they couldn't figure out why that was happening. And so
Amy, how are you holding up at this point? That's an awful lot to take in as a young mom with another child back at home that that requires all of your attention. Were you just in a state of shock?
When I look back on it, I do think I was emotional. I was teary and all of that. But I do think I was in like just function, make it happen mode of like, listen, this is the next step. And I do remember it was like the first time away from my sweet Graham, who, was a toddler himself, and we were together all the time except for my work hours. And then there's mommy, so I was missing him a lot. But we quickly just had to say, okay, we've got to emotionally, I think I was in shock. And I do remember coming back from that trip of them saying, you need to move to Philly for the rest of your pregnancy and deliver here and probably have all of like have Hudson's surgery here, which meant months,
Yeah.
I remember like figuring out like, what am I going to do about my job and family and everything. And everyone really rallied around us to make all of that happen. But I do remember standing and looking out the window, and I'm pregnant, and my sweet husband, who loves Jesus and loves me so well, he's like, what can I do? What do you need? And I just remember saying like, I just want to die.
Mm.
And I wasn't like, going to act on that, but I just knew what we were coming up against was bigger than I could manage. And
Yeah.
I really just wanted an escape. I didn't know how to word that. I really had like dreams of going to the Bahamas and like being somewhere beautiful. And I was like, but I'm bringing my very sick baby with me. I had a lot of questions for the Lord, because even though I had walked with the Lord for a long time, we were asking God to move and heal. I mean, there was plenty of time left in my womb for the Lord to do something, right? Like he could,
Sure.
he could stitch those little chambers pretty easily. He's God, and he can do anything, and he can do whatever he pleases. And so I was having these wrestling matches with him of like, but why aren't you? Like we're pleading with you and asking you to move, and it didn't seem like he was doing anything. And so that kind of started off a season of me of just really having a lot of anger. My anger taught me a lot, but it was a hard season with me and Jesus, honestly.
Yeah.
So,
and that's okay. He's a good father, and he can handle that.
He totally can. And he knows what's in our hearts anyway. So even if I was not articulating it, it was down in my heart,
Right.
And so he knew that I was like, I had gone through other hard things in my life, but nothing like this where, and our doctors told, like, there were plenty of other children. They were telling us like Hudson had every chance at life. Now he was going to have a heart condition his whole life. But he, with surgery, like staged surgeries over the course of his childhood, they had every hope that he would live and be a little kid and like grow up in our family. There wasn't this like, palliative care offered at this point. Yeah. So I'll kind of speed up because there's so many little details, but basically I went into early labor at 34 weeks and my water broke. And so we had to have an emergency C-section. And there's some things that you're just like, you pray for and you're like, why isn't God moving? And then other things that you pray for and it just, God meets your needs. And I was in Philadelphia at this point. My sweet husband, again, a pilot, he was in a contracted job in Texas. And so my mother-in-law was with me, who's a prayer warrior, and her name's Betty, and loved our family so well and loves our family so well. She had come to take care of Graham and me during this time. And so, but I'm like realizing I'm going to have this emergency C-section by myself because she's got to take care of my toddler. And so I'm having all this fear and like, just like, oh my gosh, like I'm basically going to be in this situation alone and Hudson may not even take a breath. And like, I'm going to have to watch my baby die on my own. Like just all the like traumas that, so I didn't know how to process that. And then, lo and behold, it's still dark outside. And my sister-in-law that I mentioned earlier, Crystal, and a dear friend of mine, Kristen, showed up. They had taken the red eye from Charlotte to Philly and walked in the room and like, they came to hold me up in the battle, and I still like remember like feeling like, okay, like even though I'm still really mad that like I can do this because then they could take Graham, they could take my toddler, and then my mother-in-law could come with me into the surgery. And so
now that's a true friend.
Oh man. And they had their own lives and plenty of things going on that they just dropped. And they actually, over the course of that year that this was all from diagnosis to losing our sweet boy, they came multiple times up there and stayed with me and looked out for me and sent things that, I think pretty sure Kristen even like sent us a crib, via mail because Graham was sleeping in a pack and play, like just things over and over again of where community really stepped in and showed us, even though I was mad at the Lord, he was providing through these people who love us so well.
Yeah.
So we went through, and they prepared me with the delivery of, we don't know how Hudson's going to do. He has fluid in his lungs, so we don't know, will he breathe at all? Like, will you get to see him? We'll probably have to whisk him away to stabilize him. We just didn't know. So in the delivery, I was this like sterile blank room of just like, there were doctors for me, doctors for Hudson, nurses. I mean, it was just like a crowded, sterile space of white and light, above me. And my mother-in-law was in there with me. And I remember like this lightness kind of came in the room, and it was the anesthesiologist. And he was just so calming. And he said, can I play some music for you? And I immediately was thinking, like, maybe let's play like spa music or beach waves or something, like, to calm me down. And I remembered I had been listening to the song Cornerstone in my office at work at the college I worked at. And I was like, you know what? Can you play Cornerstone for me? And I had to tell him, he found it. And initially, whatever he put on, I think it was by Hillsong, but it was another song I didn't know. But by the time they were delivering Hudson, Cornerstone was playing. And so my mother-in-law was singing it through our tears over him, and
oh, wow.
welcoming him to the world. And so, and again, they had prepared me that I wouldn't see him. And so, right. But the nurse came and told me, she's like, he let out a little cry. I didn't hear it.
Oh.
So let me know that he's fighting. And,
yeah.
And so, they got me all taken care of. They whisked Hudson to another room and got him all stabilized. And I don't know, but a little while later, I was back in my room, and they brought Hudson in, and I got to meet him in person, not just in my belly. And Graham got to meet him, his big brother, and my mother-in-law. And from there, they whisked him to the cardiac intensive care unit. And then a few hours later, Corey finally got there from Texas after this emergency and got to meet his sweet boy. And then from there, a bunch of family came in, and aunts and uncles, and my parents came from North Carolina. And so lots of family came in over the course of those weeks, and got to meet our sweet boy, Hudson. And I'll just the whole time in the hospital, he would show stability and he was getting better and doing well. And then he would have an infection or another procedure would need to be done. He also had a liver complication. He ended up having surgery on that when he was maybe 4 or 5 months old. And so he was just a sick boy, and they couldn't quite figure him out. They couldn't really, there was not a syndrome he had, or there wasn't any one thing that was going on with him that they were like, okay, this is why, and here's the pathway forward. It was always okay, let's try this. Let's try this. Let's do that. And it was always tweaking things to try to get him stabilized. And, but we had sweet time with him. We would go to the hospital every day and sit with, and sometimes we couldn't hold him because he wasn't stable. And then sometimes I'd just hold him for hours, but I would be right next to his little bedside.
Yeah.
He did have 2 open heart surgeries and liver surgeries, plus catheterizations, lots of procedures over the course of his sweet little life.
Oh God. How long, what kind of period of time are we talking about with all these surgeries, Amy?
So he had his first open heart surgery at 10 days old, which is crazy to think about because
wow.
the heart is so tiny. I mean, he was 6 pounds and something. So you can imagine how skilled the doctors are to work on such a tiny heart.
Yeah, really.
He didn't have his next heart surgery until he was right around 8 months old, 7, 8 months old.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7.5, somewhere like that. So it was, and then in between that was the other stuff that he had to go through.
Yeah. And you guys are still in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Yeah. And our church came alongside us. They helped us get a place to stay, and other friends. Initially, we were staying at friends' places. We had never met them. And they said, come stay at our house. And I mean, it's the city. So you're in this townhome. It's yeah. And when people invite you to stay with you ever, that's hard. That's really generous. But when you're in the city and people ask you, let you stay, it's unbelievable because it's city living. So it's small and anyway, so it was just very generous. And then we realized how long we were actually going to be there. And that's when our church came alongside us and helped us rent a place. And it was about a mile from the hospital, so we could walk back and forth and that kind of thing.
Wow. Wow. What a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, we're held up by so many people and communities of people taking care of us.
Yeah.
But then, it became clear that Hudson needed his second heart surgery. And it normally, 2 surgeries are done. These stage surgeries for children with HLHS are typically done in the first year of life, but they want them to gain weight for the second one and be at a stable place and all of that. And it just became clear that he needed the second surgery, but he wasn't gaining weight as much as they wanted as quickly and all of that. And eating issues are pretty common with heart babies.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we went forward with the surgery because he needed it, even though we would have liked him to have been a little stronger and a little bigger. And initially out of the surgery, he did well. Like everyone thought he was doing great. But then, and we don't even really know why all this started happening, but he basically could not keep his oxygen saturation levels up. And they just started kind of drifting down and then staying there and then drifting down and staying there. And they just couldn't get them back up.
Yeah.
And so it just became clear within, so he had a surgery, I would say, so again, some of the timeline gets fuzzy, but he had about a good week. And then from there, it was about a week or so that it just became clear that it was going to become palliative care.
Yeah.
And so that last day, I don't know if it's just mother's intuition or the Lord's discernment or what in me, but I just kind of knew we were approaching the end with him. And I remember telling Corey, because Corey, my husband, he's very engaged. He's such a good dad, such a good husband, but he's also a doer. And so he's like, oh, we need to get the battery changed on the van. And he's just trying to do things. And I was like, babe, I just kind of looked at him. I was like, I think you need to stay here today. I think you need to stay here. And he got it. He got it from me. He understood. I think he thought we knew we were losing our boy, but he thought we had a couple weeks. Yeah. And I was like, I just didn't think so. And sadly, I was right. So, yeah, that was March 20th of 2016. And he passed away, I think, at 4:00. But my husband really modeled for me being a dad as a Christian man, because he understood, even though his heart was being ripped out, he understood who Hudson really belonged to. Because I remember he was holding him and he started singing, I Surrender All. And then he finished it, I Surrender Hudson. And I'm like, oh gosh, I can sing that. And it probably took me a year to be able to really sing that to the Lord and say, even though this is killing us, it's hurting so badly.
Yeah.
Your ways are not my ways. And your plan is bigger and better. It's hard for me to say that as a mom, because what's better than having your own child with you, as you understand?
Yes, absolutely.
But somehow in God's eternal sovereignty and goodness, it's not like he's sovereign and not good, or he's good and not sovereign. He's both.
Right.
In his sovereign goodness, this was what he deemed for Hudson. And even though, again, even now, these years later, I still would choose for Hudson to be with me. I am submitted.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm submitted to a God who's proven himself to me, and that I'm one day closer to the Lord, and I'm one day closer to seeing Hudson again. And so, but that last day, we, Corey sang that over him, and then we sang Cornerstone again.
Wow.
Him. Yeah.
That is so sweet. I know it's so hard. And I just, I see the pain even now as we're talking, and that's been it's been 7 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. But to see you able to share this story of your sweet boy, I hope that people that are listening are hearing your heart, not just the words, but hearing your heart.
Yeah.
Because it is so hard to lose a child, but in a relationship with the Lord, it gives you such hope, and the joy that can coexist in that grief, knowing that you'll be reunited with that sweet boy one day. in the presence of the Lord.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think initially I remember my mom talking to me about grieving with hope, and I was in such a dark place. I was like, there's no hope in this. Like, I'm just
Yeah,
grieving. Like, I just couldn't. Again, I'd walked with the Lord. I'd been in ministry. Like, I should have the answers, right? Like, I should be
of
able to,
course.
should
Yeah.
be able to apply the truths I had learned and told other people to myself. But I was in such a broken place that I was struggling to believe that. But I think it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 months after Hudson passed away, I realized I was listening to a podcast and it was just a story, but it was a man who, I don't know if he didn't have faith or religion, or I don't know what he believed, but he basically was articulating he had lost multiple family members, which is in a tragedy. But he was basically communicating his grief looked like, are they happy? Are they safe? Are they hungry? Are they cold? Where are they? And I remember thinking,
Mhm.
like, this is the hope that I have. And I want that for this man as well. It's not a judgment on how he was grieving. His life was
Right.
hard. It was more of, okay, there is a difference in how the questions he has in mind, because I don't wonder if Hudson's hungry or cold. Like, he's with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He has all the answers to everything we've ever questioned. And he is whole and he isn't in pain and he is glorified because he has seen Jesus. And so, for this man who had those questions, my heart longs for him to have a security in his, and those questions could subside. They're going to be replaced with other questions of why God.
Yeah.
But there is this stability of, like, I don't wonder where Hudson is. I don't wonder how he's doing. I have wonderings of what is heaven like, for him.
Yeah.
But in terms of his well-being, I'm not grieving for those answers or worried for him, so
Yeah.
there is that hope that he's whole and he's doing awesome. He's with
And
Jesus.
doesn't that just make so much difference for you, just living it out every day, knowing that? And what I was hearing from you also is when you suffer the loss of a child and you see somebody else who's going through that exact same journey that you've been on, it does make you, I think, most of us, it makes us so much more compassionate towards that person. And you want them to know what you know, and you want them to have what you have. Specifically, what I'm referring to is that hope that you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't imagine, if you haven't experienced the death of a child, you can't possibly tell someone else what that's like and how deep that pain is and how hard that separation is that you suddenly find yourself in from
Yeah.
your child. But knowing that they're in the presence of the Lord
Mm-hmm.
does give you hope, and it does encourage you.
It's like a balm, it's like you're so
Yeah,
wounded, but there's a balm to your wound. There's some kind of soothing to you to say, like, he is whole. And for Ryan, he is whole. And
absolutely.
that he is, our kids are not lost in some weird universe. Like, I don't even know what people believe
Yeah,
that hold on
yeah,
to Jesus, but,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and someone listening to this may not have answers to those questions, and that's okay. Like, I,
Sure.
even as a Christian, had profound questions for God, and I still do. But there is a stability in knowing that the one who formed your child or formed the one that you've lost, that he's the one that sets our number of days, that he's in control. He's not caught off guard. He's not surprised, that he is sovereignly working for our goodness and our kids' goodness, even though there is pain and that we live in a cursed, fallen world. And so,
Yes.
even as Christians or people questioning, all of us are going to walk through life. You can't walk through this life unscathed. And so, I am thankful for the hope of Christ and the hope of eternity that as a Christian has been like balm to my soul in the midst of pain.
Well, that is so well said, and it is so incredibly accurate. Yeah, I'm glad that you found that word in this moment.
Yeah. I mean,
because
I think, you feel like you're bleeding out. I mean, and again,
yeah,
I'm describing it sitting on the seat of mom of child loss, but I've sat with friends who've walked through divorce. I've sat with friends with a cancer diagnosis. And even though our stories are different, it is, the layers of loss that you're experiencing, this is death and grief and like layers
sure.
of loss. I think, Greg, what you were saying too, it's hard to describe to someone what it's like to lose a child, or really any loss, unless you've sat in that seat. Like, how can you articulate it? But it's all the layers, I think, that continue to come up for me of like, it
Yeah,
hits me at weird moments. I'm driving in the car and I've got 3 kids and there's a missing car seat, or, they're in the bathtub, or Christmas morning, or, even like the lineage. And I'm sure your wife have experienced this with Ryan. It's like, I wanted Hudson to grow up and get married and have grandbabies. And like
yeah,
the layers of all of that, that you're like, oh gosh, like it's one more thing that's a gut punch that you maybe weren't.
yeah.
And they hit at the most inopportune, hard times of like, you know,
It's so
um,
random. And
so
I
random.
think what we're talking about here is a future grief.
Yes. Yep.
That there's the immediate,
Yeah.
but then there's that future grief as you start thinking about, oh my gosh, it's been 5 years, it's been 10
Mhm.
years. What would
Yeah.
Ryan be doing today? What would Hudson's life be
Totally.
like today?
Yeah.
And you find yourself grieving that.
Yeah.
And that's what people that are looking and they can't possibly
Right.
comprehend that.
It's like that ripple effect through your whole
Yeah.
life, like
Yeah.
like the shrapnel, it just kind of goes out. And because I think about, I remember Tim Keller saying this. I don't know if he said it or if he wrote it, but I think he said it, that he had a group of friends that were really close. And then one of them passed away. And then another really close friend, he never saw a certain piece of that friend again, because only the one that had passed away was able to draw that out of him. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
it's like, I can see that with my grandparents. Like when my grandfather lost my grandmother, like he was a little different because my grandmother wasn't there to pull that part of him out of his personality that she only could do. And so I do think about that in terms of my kids. Like, how would my oldest, he would have been 16, 17 months older than Hudson. Like, he would be a totally different kid than he is now, because he spent a lot of years as the only child and only
Yeah.
grandchild on my side of the family. But had he had that one that was like right next to him, because now I have 2 toddlers, like they're really
Yeah.
close. So you wonder like what the influence that would have had. And then again, in my older years of Hudson would have, I guess, probably gotten married and had grandchildren, or, I mean, just all the things that you don't think you're going to miss. But I think that's where it's like, there's this, missionary that I have admired for many years. She's with the Lord now, but I got to hear her speak when I was 19. And she was a missionary in the Congo, and she had been, assaulted and kept captive. I mean, just crazy stories. This was back
Yeah.
in the 60s. And, she said, people would ask me, was it worth it? You did all this for the Lord. And she's like, no, it was not worth it. It was not worth it. She didn't say it this way. She was much more articulate with her lovely British accent, but she said it was not worth it, but God is worthy. And that's the
Oh,
difference. It's like, because I'm like, is it worth all of this? Like, I'm so honored that God deemed that Corey and I would be Hudson's parents. Like, no one else has
right.
that privilege. But they also, I've got in that is the heartache. And I was like, it's not worth it. Like, no matter the opportunities I get, I love to talk about Hudson. I love to help other families who are walking through this journey and feel like they can't survive it, because I've been there. But even all of that, even seeing all that God's done in the years since Hudson went to be with Jesus, it's none of it feels worth it. But if
No.
it's bigger than that, it's God
Yeah.
is worthy. God is worthy of the story. He is worthy of my pain. He is worthy of my grief. He's worthy of Hudson's pain. And so
Absolutely true.
it's not, is it
Yeah.
worth it? It's God is worthy.
Yeah. Amy, I know this might be a little bit of a difficult question, but
Yeah.
how would you say that these years of grief have changed you?
Yeah.
Because they do.
Oh gosh,
Because
yeah.
it does.
Yeah. I do think that I'm different in a positive way that I'm different is my ears are attuned to people's pain.
Yeah.
So like, you hear a story, a friend of a friend, like, oh my gosh, this happened or whatever. I would have been like, oh, that's terrible. And I would have even prayed. But now I find myself stepping into it. Like I step towards it and I want to stick my neck out. And so like, for example, a friend of mine called me, I don't know, it was probably back in March now, and just said it was a Sunday morning. And she just texted me, hey, can I call you really quick? And I knew, I was like, something's up. So she called me. And so someone on her staff team, they had lost their son after he had lived 3 days. And, one, she wouldn't have called me had I not walked through this. She knew me. She knew my
Right.
story. She knew Hudson's story. And so, but I immediately am like, when she's ready, I'll go coffee with her, give her my number, we can call, text, whatever. And so we've met a few times. I just find that God has given that kind of fire in me because I understand the vulnerability that mom is in and the dad. You're so vulnerable. You're vulnerable. Your marriage is vulnerable. You're vulnerable. Like it's a really critical time to have someone to link arms with you. And the
Yeah.
number one thing that helped me, the Lord helped me for sure. But the number one thing that gave me like tangible, visible hope were two different moms. September Valdry, she's an author and has a great book called Colors of Goodbye, if you're looking for a resource about her daughter, Katie. And then Joan Kelly, they came alongside me. She lost her son, Will, to leukemia. Both amazing women. I could see in them, they were probably 7 years out, about where I am now, actually,
Yeah.
7, 8 years out. But I could see in them a brightness, a joy of the Lord, a countenance of joy. They were not downcast. And I didn't know, I'm like, are they faking it? But they weren't. Like, I could tell that they weren't faking it. They weren't just putting on a happy face for everyone around them and the kids that they had on earth. They were living it out. And I was like, okay, like they are so authentic about how painful this is, but they are also have a countenance of joy. And I wanted that for myself. I'm like, I don't know how to get back there, but I'm going to grieve. I'm going to feel all of this. I'm not going to push it down, but I also want to have hope and have that show on my countenance. So I want that for others. So I think that's one difference is that I'm just more empathetic and I'm willing to step into the story a little bit more. Some of the hard things I feel like that have changed about me is that everything feels a little bit bittersweet. I think that comes with age anyway, a little bit that,
Yeah.
When you're a little younger, everything can feel sweet. But as you get older, you start losing people that you love even naturally, so holidays feel different because you're losing grandparents or whatever or other family members. But I think with losing Hudson, I feel like, even small things can feel bittersweet. It's like he's not here, he's with the Lord, but it's also we're belly laughing as a family, and
Right.
like I think I've gained the skills of kind of moving in and out of that, of like I can belly laugh at my funny, silly husband and my kids, and then also let myself tear up that Hudson's not in it with us. And I almost always cry a little bit on Christmas morning, or I let myself pre-grieve ahead of time so that I can be fully present with my kids. So I've learned some skills that I wish I didn't have to have. Like I wish I could just be fully present and that's not there. But I don't think that's a realistic life. I think all of us need to get our grief muscles. And so it's changed me, hopefully for the better. I've really fought to not grow bitter. But I still have a lot of questions for the Lord, and I think that's okay. I think it's okay I bring those to him, and
those questions are safe with him.
Totally.
And what you said just a moment ago is so important because we can either let grief cause us to grow bitter or better.
For sure. And you can get stuck too,
Yeah.
Stuck in those.
Well, there is actually a couple of years ago, the American Psychiatric Association added a mental health disorder to their book of diagnostics, and it's called prolonged grief disorder. And it usually occurs when someone who's grieving, it doesn't just have to be a parent, but they get stuck at that place where they have a hard time moving beyond the loved one's death back to the loved one's life.
Yeah.
And that is so important that we lean into the grief, as you were just talking about. Lean into it, experience it, because it's real. You're not going to be able to escape it. It's hard work, yes. But when we do that, we will get to a place where we can celebrate our child's life again. In our cases, we can celebrate our children again. We can, we had lots of years with Ryan, so we can laugh about him now because we know that he would laugh back with us. But part of that is we have to make a lot of difficult choices along the way to lean into it. And that comes in a lot of different forms, as you were just talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. It's difficult but I think some of it is giving yourself permission.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes we can feel like, if I give myself permission to enjoy a family vacation with my, and be fully there, or enjoy Christmas or these special moments, or even just the day to day, like laughing or whatever. I remember letting myself laugh after losing Hudson, and it felt almost like a betrayal. And like, you can feel those things of saying like, okay, I'm moving forward without my son. But I knew that I was going to get stuck if I didn't let myself feel that joy. And it is a, letting yourself engage in the reality of today. It's painful because it does mean like you're not with the person that you're grieving. Like their life has ended. So you're like, and you're letting yourself experience joy today. It's okay to do that. It's okay to say, like you said, if Ryan were here, he would laugh. And some people may think this very odd, but we do this with my kids of like, especially my oldest. I think it's helped his grief to say, if Hudson were here, what would he do? Like when we got a new van, Graham actually led it. He was like, well, like, where would Hudson sit? Like, I was like, well, buddy, there's a seat right next to you in the back of the van. He's like, oh yeah, okay. And we almost like try to include him in those things. And it's not all day. It's not every day. It's once in a while. But we do talk about him. And I think it's like healthy to say, in some things we're going to bring him along and let him be still in this family. And some of our family photos, we hold a picture of Hudson, and we don't do it every single time, but we acknowledge that he's still very much a part of us. And
and I don't think that's strange at all. We do that all the time, Amy. It's like you talk about him in the present. And for those that are listening that may be in a fresh season of grief, that may be difficult right now for you. But Amy and I both understand that there is hope in the future, that you too will be able to do that. But lean into it now and allow those waves to come. So eventually those waves of joy and those waves of all those sweet memories will come flooding back as well.
Yeah. It's like, and I think each of us in different seasons need different permissions. It's like sometimes we need permission to grieve because we are the kind of person that we're just going to do the day. I'm going to make the bed and make the meal. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to just do the day. And so you don't let yourself grieve. You just kind of stuff it all down. And then another person may, like, that's all they can do. Like they're stuck in bed and their grief looks very like outward and like they feel very handicapped by it. And honestly, both of those are okay for a season. Like you have to survive the initial, blow of like your loss. The initial loss it is very much survival. It's shower, eat, walk, do just survival, breathe, But eventually it is very much, I say that word permission because I think we can vow that we're going to do certain things it's very easy in the midst of pain. I was like, you vow, well, I will never do this, or I must always do this, because you're trying to get some sense of control back. So out of control. Like I know moms who are like, they have vowed they must do certain things on their child's birthday every year. And like, I've really stopped, not force myself to that. If I feel like going to Hudson's grave on his birthday, I do. If I feel like I can't do that, then I don't. I've given myself a lot of permission and a lot of grace to just take it as how I feel and that day, and so even permission to grieve, permission to heal.
Yeah.
Because I do think that sometimes we can get stuck in either place of like, I'm not going to feel anything or I'm going to feel it all the time.
Yeah.
There is a moment when you have to say, you know what, like my healing is not a betrayal. My laughter is not a betrayal. I'm not leaving them behind, but it is a walking through it and an acknowledgement of like, there is still life to live.
Yeah.
Even through tears, and it may feel absolutely impossible if you're in the freshness of it all, but just a voice down the road can tell you that like, there's a lot of belly laughs in your future. There's a lot of joy and hope and blessings that you're going to bring out of your story. And I'll tell you, none of it is worth it. Like I said earlier, but God is worthy. It will never feel worth it. Like there's nothing that can happen in this side of the world, in this side of eternity that would feel worth the loss of my son. But I know there's a verse in 1 Corinthians. It's right after the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13 at the end. And it basically says something to the effect of like, you will know fully as you are fully known when you see him face to face. And I love that verse because it answers all my laundry list of questions of like, why this God and what didn't you do this? Nah, nah, nah. It's like, but when I see him face to face, just as I'm fully known, I will know fully. And I won't even have to give him my list,
Right.
I will know. I will be like, oh, Jesus, that's why,
Yeah. It's hard to wrap your finite brain around that. That's one of those things that you do have to, you just take on faith. That when that time comes, God will take care of all of those questions, and probably most every one of them will just completely fade away. And that one moment when you see Jesus and you see your child, it'll be like all that other stuff was just a vapor.
And we'll see the whole picture. We'll see the beauty of the Lord, and we'll see like what he was doing, and we'll be different because now we will be like him. We will be like the Lord because I think God could even come right now, sit in my living room with me and explain it to me. And I'd be like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
I am all I am. I'm Hudson's mama.
Right.
And I don't like the plan, but once we're with the Lord, and when I do look at the Lord, we will feel differently about it. That wholeness will come for us, and we will be like, okay, Lord, we get it now. We see you, we see the whole picture. And because I don't think that anything would suffice to, millions of people coming to Christ because of Ryan, it still wouldn't be okay. It still wouldn't make it fair. It still wouldn't, it's like, so even
I do.
God using our children's stories for his glory, this side of heaven, it still doesn't feel worth it to me. And that's where I have to go back to the worthy word,
Yeah. Kathy and I agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one last thing before we go. From your own experiences, Amy, what did you find for you personally helped you the most from people on the outside who were looking in, who knew you, who loved you? What was it that stood out that they did, not just in that fresh season, but weeks and months later?
Yeah. I think so many, community is so helpful when your life is falling apart. And community does not have to look like hundreds of people. It might be two.
That's true.
Some of us don't have these big churches or a big family that can step in. And it probably won't be who you think it's going to be anyway. I don't know if you've had that experience, but sometimes the people that show up aren't who you think are going to be the people that show up, because the people that show up.
So true.
Right. And we just have to give everybody, again, it's another permission word of like, you think it's going to be so-and-so.
Yeah.
And that person, for whatever reason, does not engage. Maybe they're not equipped. They don't know what to
Yep.
say. They feel like they're going to hurt you. They're wrapped up in their own pain. Like there's lots of reasons why someone doesn't show up. And we just have to kind of give them that space and grace, because hopefully and prayerfully God will provide the person that you weren't even thinking that will show up. And so that's hard though, because you can get your feelings hurt and feel like they don't love you, but it's not true. Typically people aren't stepping towards you because they don't know what to do. They don't know what
Exactly.
to say, and they really aren't trying to hurt you. It's just they legitimately don't know what to do or say. And so there's grace for that. But I would say the things that, obviously in the very beginning, practical help, people sent gift cards, and again, our church stepped in and helped pay our rent. And some of those, I think lost people don't realize that regardless of the type of loss or how a lot of times affects you financially, more than you would ever dream it could. And so,
Yeah.
Stepping into some of those practicals, especially if someone's been sick or if it's sudden too, because then you're not prepared. Like there's just, things that there's all the reasons it could come in and affect finances. So thinking through practicals of, everything from my mom's cousin cut our grass to, because we were away, to picking up mail. If they, for us, we were in a long season in the hospital, someone helping with our older son. Obviously meals and things like that are helpful. Gas cards were helpful because we were doing a lot of back and forth. And so this little thinking through practicals are always going to lighten the load, and you may never hear from that person. They may never even thank you because they're consumed, but no, it makes a big difference. And then, in the long run, I would say the things that matter to me now. I remember we were coming home and we were walking through the doors of our house and we weren't bringing our son home, and we hadn't been here in months. And so a church that we didn't even go to or didn't even have any connection to really, other than they just reached out to me, cleaned our entire house, mowed the grass, got it ready for us to come home.
Oh man.
Like dusted and vacuumed and all the things that hadn't been done, from spider webs, I'm sure. I don't even know, because we hadn't been home in so long, and got it ready for us. And but some of that is they said, what do you need? You're coming home. What do you need? And I made it my need known, because I knew I couldn't manage that in the state I was in. And so, anyway, so just community made a big difference. Now I would say the handful of folks that remember Hudson's birthday and his heaven day, I don't even know what to call it, the day he went to the Lord, those are significant to me. People who remember Hudson at Christmas. We do a little fundraiser at Christmas for families who are in the hospital, and even small things like a friend of mine runs a race every year in New York City, and she always makes a donation, and she always tells me she'll make a little note. It's in Hudson's honor. Like I'm doing this, small things like that. If another friend of mine ran a marathon and put his picture on his shirt, there's things that you're going to run the race anyway. Like he was already training for that and decided to include our son. Getting a Christmas card that has Hudson's name on it. And some people might not find that normal. I don't know. But for me, anytime I get to be Hudson's mama, I love it, or even if you don't put it in the address, you're not addressing it to Hudson, because maybe that doesn't feel okay to you because he's already with the Lord, but mentioning him in the note to say, we know you're missing him this Christmas, little things like that really go a long way for me, of just remembering. Because I think the other thing, as time goes on, and you can speak to this too, and let me know if you feel this way, you and Kathy, but it feels like you're the only one shouldering the loss. But when people mention him and bring him up, it actually helps me feel like I'm not in it alone. Like even for my parents, for them to say they have 6 grandkids and not 5, because he is their grandbaby, you know? So, and I just had to tell my mom, I'm like, Mama, please just, for my sake, will you always include him? And she's like, I didn't know if you wanted me to. So she does now. Like if people ask her, she'll list them off, and she always includes Hudson. And that's what I wanted, and she's honored that. So
I appreciate you sharing that, because we have found that to be so true in our lives as well. One of the things that you fear is that people will forget your child, and that people will be afraid to say their name any longer. And when people use your child's name, or they just include them in just a normal everyday conversation when you're with them, oh my gosh, it endears you even more to these people who have just become closer than family. And you cannot express to them or to anybody else. I can't express it now. You're talking about it, how the impact that it makes on you as a parent to
Mhm.
know that they care about you enough
Right.
that they take the risk of talking about your child, because we've told them, take the risk. You couldn't possibly hurt us any more than we've already been hurt.
Mhm.
We love to hear his name. We love to talk about him in the present. So please do. And I appreciate you sharing that as well. We've talked about that a number of times on the podcast.
I remember one of the best things someone did to me, and I knew this person had walked through grief because she just said to me, "Tell me about Hudson."
Oh,
But she knew that that's what I wanted. I mean, it's just like
yeah,
any other mom. It's like, I want to brag on my kids,
of
And
course.
so I think that, and again, like there's room to say, like, because there are some days that it may be too hard for me to do that. And I have the freedom to say, I really want to tell you about him. Let's do it the next time we're together.
Yeah,
No offense, everything is fine. Or like that day, I was so eager to tell her that
yeah,
he had silly hair and really round cheeks like his mama. And like I wanted, and you with Ryan, you have all these little intricate details about his personality and stories from his childhood that you could tell. And like those things, you want to still talk about that stuff. So
yes, you do.
people are scared that they're going to step on our toes or bring it up.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Believe me, you don't have to bring Hudson up. There is
No,
not, I don't even know if there's a moment that he's not in my brain.
no,
Like, I'm always bringing
exactly.
up where my kids are and what they're doing and are they healthy and strong. And Hudson's the same way. Like, there's not, you never can bring up Hudson for me. Like, he's
No,
always there, always. Yeah.
yeah. Whether they're here with us or whether they're in heaven,
Right.
they're in our thoughts continually.
Yeah. There's not a
It,
moment without it.
no,
Yeah.
that doesn't change if they're not here with you. So take that risk.
Yeah.
Amy, before we go, I want you to tell us a little bit about what you're doing today, because as we talked about at the top of this, you are very busy. You're very involved with Nothing is Wasted Ministries. And you guys are doing so many good things for people who are in a season of grief. So why don't you just take a minute or two and tell us about that, how people can get in touch with
Yeah.
Nothing is Wasted, how they can get involved. You guys have so many groups that fit so many different types of grief and seasons of grief.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an incredible ministry. And the best way to just learn about us is nothingiswasted.com. And the best, I mean, there's so many different things, but the one thing that I'll say is if you don't even know where to begin, a great place to start is we have a couple different resources. One is called the Pain to Purpose course, and
Mm-hmm.
it's self-guided. It's a series of videos, and you get your own little notebook, and you can answer questions and work through all these different waypoints of like your own pain story and also you don't just stick with your pain. It actually is a journey forward towards purpose, and you can do it at your own pace. And then also we have a kind of supplemental devotional. It's a 42-day devotional that walks through different people of the Bible and their pain stories. And so it's an additional resource or you can do it on its own. Those are two things that I would say that the ministry does so well. And then we also have a podcast as well that is just lots Greg and Kathy got to come on and talk about Ryan. And there's so many stories of people who are so authentic in their story of pain and loss, but they also are offering hope. And I will say too, it's not just loss of a person. It's everything from divorce to sexual betrayal to church hurt. I mean, there's like all kinds of different stories
Right.
on there. So whatever your story is, there's probably a podcast episode that would speak to your heart and offer hope to you.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're listening today and you like to do podcasts, please check out Baby's podcast, because as Amy said, it is absolutely incredible. There are so many stories on there. You will connect with one. There are so many to choose from, and it's just so very well done. And thank you guys for all that you are doing there, Amy.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I was a listener and a recipient before I came on the team there. So I'm speaking as a person who the hope that I got was helpful for me. And then also just now I'm on the team, I get to see a little bit more of all that's there. So there's a lot available for anyone who's in a hard place. Or if you know someone who needs a resource, like it's a great place to look for something that you could send the devotional to a friend.
Yeah, it sure is. And I will say that having been a guest on your podcast weighed heavily on us starting our podcast. So thank you guys for the opportunity, for Kathy and me to have been able to do that. And Amy, I just want to say again, what a blessing it's been and what an honor it's been to have you on our podcast today and to share the story of your sweet boy, Hudson.
Well, I appreciate it so much. I would like to invite anyone who's listening to, if you want to hear more specifics of Hudson's story, I put a little video together and you can find it. It's on YouTube at This Wholehearted Life, kind of a wholehearted because he had half a heart.
Yeah.
This Wholehearted Life, and it's called Hudson's Story. And if you are someone who cares about adoption or any of those things, there's other part of our story on there as well. It's a great place to connect to me personally. That's apart from our My Nothing is Wasted role. And then if you just want to hear a little bit more about his little journey, I did that video a couple years ago around his birthday. And so I wanted to share that to you. So, and Greg, I'm so glad that you put this podcast together because I think it's a niche that is needed. And so many people need to be able to articulate what they're feeling. And then there are people who aren't ready to talk about it, who need to hear other people's stories of hope. So I'm so thankful that you are doing this.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
If you find our podcast meaningful, we invite you to follow us so that you can automatically receive the latest episodes. Also, we'd like to invite you to contact us and talk with us about sharing your story on a future episode, because every story is important and matters to God. Please reach out via email at hope@emptychairendeavor.com. That's hope@emptychairendeavor.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening